A flash of lightning split the night sky, and in that blinding second, Officer Daniel Hayes saw her a small girl lying motionless in the middle of the rain-soaked road. Fever burned off her fragile body as she whispered, "Please, don't take me back." His heart clenched. Who was this child, and what dark secret made her beg for safety from the very people who should have loved her? Before we dive into this gripping story, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the powerful turns this journey takes. Now, let's step into the storm. The summer storm came without warning, rolling over Evergreen County like a furious beast. Rain pounded against the windshield of Officer Daniel Hayes' patrol car, each drop a drumbeat in the night. His wipers struggled to keep up, slashing back and forth in frantic rhythm, but the world outside still looked blurred, swallowed in darkness. Daniel leaned forward, squinting through the downpour. He had driven these back roads for 12 years, but tonight felt different. The anniversary always did. 3 years since his younger brother Michael had died after years of struggling in a home that had offered too little love and too much anger. The guilt clung to Daniel like wet clothes. He should have seen the signs, should have protected Michael better. Now every child in pain reminded him of the boy he couldn't save. Lightning ripped across the sky, lighting up the twisted trees for the briefest moment. And that was when he saw her. A small figure sprawled across the asphalt rain, pooling around her fragile body. Daniel slammed the brakes, his patrol car skidding sideways before jolting to a stop. His heart lurched into his throat. He threw open the door, the storm immediately drenching him to the skin. "God, no," he muttered, sprinting forward. The girl looked no older than 6 or 7. Her hair was plastered to her face, her lips pale, her clothes soaked through. But what struck him most was the heat radiating from her body, even in the cold rain. He touched her cheek. She was burning with fever. Her eyelids fluttered open. Dark brown eyes, glassy with illness and terror, met his. Her lips trembled as she tried to form words. "Please," she whispered hoarsely, "don't take me back." Daniel froze, the words piercing deeper than the thunder around them. For a moment it wasn't this child he saw. It was Michael cowering in their shared bedroom years ago, whispering the same plea when their father's rage boiled over. Something twisted in Daniel's chest, an ache both old and new. He bent lower, his voice soft against the roar of the storm. "No one's going to hurt you, I promise." She shivered violently, her small hand clutching his uniform with desperate strength. "What's your name, sweetheart?" "Lily." The single word trembled out, fragile but clear. "All right, Lily," Daniel said gently, lifting her into his arms. She weighed almost nothing, far too light for her age. He pulled her close, shielding her from the wind. "I've got you now." Her head rested against his shoulder as he carried her back toward the patrol car. The rain stung his face, but all he could feel was the fragile rise and fall of her chest, uneven labored. He placed her in the back seat, wrapping her in the emergency blanket he always kept on hand. She whimpered, eyes darting anxiously around the dark interior. "You won't leave me, will you?" she asked, her voice small, trembling. Daniel met her gaze in the rearview mirror, his jaw tightening. "I'm not going anywhere. Not ever." As he slid into the driver's seat, he grabbed his radio. "Dispatch. This is Unit 14. I've got a child, 6 or 7 unconscious at intervals, high fever, requesting immediate ambulance to Evergreen General." Static. Then silence. The storm had knocked out the signal. "Damn," Daniel muttered, tossing the useless receiver aside. The nearest hospital was 20 minutes away. In weather like this, it might as well have been an eternity. He started the engine tires spinning against the wet road before finding grip. "Hold on, Lily." "Just hold on," he whispered, glancing back. Her eyes were closing again. "Don't let them," she mumbled. "Shh." Daniel soothed panic, tightening his throat. "You're safe. I won't let anyone hurt you." As the patrol car cut through the sheets of rain, Daniel gripped the wheel tighter than ever. The storm outside was nothing compared to the storm that had just entered his life. Because this wasn't just about a lost little girl anymore. This was about a secret so heavy that even a child's fevered whisper could make a seasoned officer's blood run cold. The patrol car screeched into the roundabout in front of Evergreen General Tires, hissing against the slick pavement. Daniel barely felt the rain soaking through his uniform as he lifted Lily from the back seat. She was frighteningly limp now, her small head lolling against his shoulder. Her breath came in shallow puffs that fogged against his collar. "Help! I need help here." Daniel's voice cut through the storm as the sliding glass doors parted. Inside, the fluorescent lights glared against the wet shine of his clothes. Nurses turned instantly, rushing forward with a gurney. Dr. Hannah Blake, her dark hair tied back and eyes sharp with urgency, stepped to the front. "What do we have?" Daniel laid Lily gently onto the gurney, his hand reluctant to let go. Found her on County Road 9. Severe fever, malnourished, dehydrated. "She's terrified, keeps saying, 'Don't take her back.'" His voice caught on the last part and he swallowed hard. "Her name's Lily. That's all I've got, Doctor." Blake's hands were already moving, checking the girl's pulse, signaling to a nurse for IV fluids. "Temps 103. We need a pediatric room now." As the gurney rolled away, Lily's hand shot out, fingers curling around Daniel's. Her eyes opened, for the briefest moment glazed, but filled with terror. "You promised," she whispered. Daniel bent close, gripping her small hand firmly. "I'm right here. I'm not going anywhere." Only then did she allow the nurses to guide her through the swinging doors. He followed, ignoring the drip of rainwater pooling beneath his boots. His uniform clung uncomfortably, but he didn't care. His gaze never left the child's face. Inside the small pediatric bay, the machines hummed to life, beeping heart monitor, fever drip starting. Dr. Blake worked swiftly, murmuring instructions. Daniel stood back against the wall, fists clenched as though holding himself there would keep his promise intact. The door creaked open and a woman with a clipboard stepped in. She looked younger than she probably was, her steady gaze softening as it landed on Lily. "I'm Sophia Ramirez, Child Welfare Services. Who found her?" Daniel raised a hand slightly. "I did." Sophia nodded once, not unkindly. "We'll need to get a statement. Do you know where she came from?" "She hasn't said," Daniel replied. "Only begged me not to take her back. Wherever back is." His voice was low-tight, carrying both anger and helplessness. Sophia's eyes flicked to the bed where Lily stirred under warm blankets. "Sometimes kids hide the truth because the truth is too painful. We'll tread gently." She lowered her clipboard, her tone softening further. "She clearly trusts you. That's important." As though on cue, Lily's eyelids fluttered again. She searched the room until her gaze found Daniel, then settled. Her lips trembled. "Don't leave." Daniel moved closer, kneeling beside her bed. "I'm right here, Lily." Her tiny hand fumbled in the blanket until it found his. Despite the fever, her grip was stubborn, holding him as though he were the only anchor she had. Dr. Blake caught Sophia's glance. "Bonded fast," she murmured. "Too fast," Sophia whispered back. But Daniel heard, and it pierced him. He thought of Michael, how his brother had clung to him during the worst nights. Some children didn't need months to form a bond, they needed a lifeline. Captain Mason Grant's voice arrived before his heavy frame filled the doorway. "Hayes!" His tone was sharp, clipped, carrying authority that could cut like steel. Daniel stood reluctantly, releasing Lily's hand with care. "Sir!" Mason crossed his arms, rain still dripping from his trench coat. His eyes moved from the child to Daniel. "You're getting personally involved." "She trusts me," Daniel said simply. "That's exactly why you need to step back. This is for child services now. You're a police officer, not a foster parent." Behind him, Lily whimpered. "Daniel!" The sound cracked him open inside. He turned back instantly, crouching again at her side. "It's all right, sweetheart. I'm not going far." Her lower lip trembled. "You came back." "Of course I did." He smoothed damp strands of hair from her forehead. "I promised." Mason's jaw tightened. "Hayes. Outside. Now." Reluctantly, Daniel followed his captain into the corridor, the door clicking shut behind them. "You know I respect you," Mason began, voice low but firm. "But I've seen this before. You lost your brother. You're carrying that wound into every call that smells like neglect. You can't save every child." Daniel's hands curled into fists at his sides. "Maybe not, but I can save this one." "You'll compromise the case," Mason said flatly. "Professional distance." "Hayes, that's an order." For a long moment, the two men stood locked in silence. Rainwater dripped from Daniel's hair onto the linoleum. His pulse thudded in his ears. Finally, he nodded stiffly, though every muscle in him rebelled. When he returned inside, Lily's eyes were fixed on the door, wide and fearful. The instant she saw him, her body sagged with relief. "You came back. I promised, didn't I?" His voice softened, meant only for her. Dr. Blake moved closer, murmuring so softly it was almost for him alone. "She's asking for you specifically. In 15 years of pediatrics, I've rarely seen a child attach this quickly. It's significant." Lily shifted under the blankets, voice-drowsy fever tugging her back toward sleep. "Stay until I sleep, please. I get bad dreams." Daniel pulled the chair close and sat down heavily. "I'll be right here." Her eyes fluttered shut and her breathing steadied the beeping of the monitor, syncing with the fragile rhythm of her rest. Yet just before she slipped fully into sleep, she whispered words that chilled every adult in the room. "He told me, never tell anyone where I really came from." The silence that followed was broken only by the storm still raging outside the hospital windows. And Daniel Hayes, sitting by the small bed, knew this night had just begun to unravel a secret far darker than any storm could hide. The storm had thinned by dawn, leaving the hospital windows freckled with drying raindrops, and a pale strip of light along the horizon. In the pediatric bay, the machines kept their quiet vigil, soft beeps, the faint hiss of oxygen, the rhythmic drip of the IV that ran into Lily's small hand. Daniel Hayes woke with a start in the chair beside her bed, his neck stiff, a folded blanket someone had draped over his shoulders during the night. For a second, he didn't know where he was. Then he saw Lily's lashes flutter against her cheek, and everything came back in a rush: the road, the rain, the plea not to take her back the way her fingers had latched onto his. Dr. Hannah Blake checked the thermometer and looked relieved. "We're coming down. 101 and falling," she said, keeping her voice gentle as if not to jostle the fragile peace that had settled in the room. "Fluids are helping. Fever reducers, too." She glanced at Daniel. "She slept better with you here." He rubbed the sleep from his eyes and nodded. "I told her I'd stay." Sophia Ramirez slipped in quietly with a small paper cup and a soft smile. "Ice chips," she said, offering them to Daniel. "Sometimes it's easier than water when they wake." Lily stirred, turning her face toward the sound. Her eyes opened cloudy but curious and landed on Daniel's. She tried to sit up, but the IV tubing tugged and she winced. "Easy," Daniel murmured, sliding a hand behind her shoulders to help. "You're safe." Her lips were dry. He held an ice chip to them. She let it melt on her tongue and closed her eyes like it was the best thing she'd tasted in days. When she looked at him again, her voice was a rasp. "You didn't leave. I told you I wouldn't." Sophia moved closer but kept a respectful distance. "Hi, Lily. I'm Sophia. I help kids with big feelings and big questions. Would it be okay if I asked you a few?" Lily's gaze flicked to Daniel, seeking his verdict. He gave the smallest nod. "Only the easy ones," he said, and it coaxed the faintest curve of a smile from her. Sophia pulled up a low stool. "Do you remember where you came from? A house, a street, maybe a special tree or fence?" Lily's smile evaporated. She looked at her hands, then at the window where the sky was a soft, rinsed blue. "We didn't have a street," she whispered. "We had a path." She glanced back at Daniel, and the words came in careful steps like a child learning a new game. "The cabin is deep in the trees. There's a creek that talks at night. We can hear it from the porch, but we don't talk back because it might tell someone where we are." "Who told you the creek might tell?" "Sophia," asked, voice steady, no sharp corners. "My Uncle," Lily said. "Uncle Victor." The name hung in the room a moment. Daniel kept his expression even though something tightened behind his ribs. "Does Uncle Victor live with you?" She nodded. "He built the cabin. He built me a swing, too, between two big oaks, and he says if you push at the right time, you can touch the sky. But only when no one's looking." She paused, choosing each memory like a stone from a river. "We don't go to town. He gets the food. He says a store can remember faces." Dr. Blake checked the IV tape without interrupting. Sophia's pen didn't move. "Why did you have to stay hidden?" "Lily?" Lily's throat worked. "Because of the big house," she whispered. "Because of the bad people there." Daniel saw her shoulders rise toward her ears, a small animal making itself small. He fought the urge to reach for her hand again and forced his voice to be soft. "Tell us about the big house if you want to." She stared at the blanket, tracing a seam with her finger. "It's loud," she said finally. "It has stairs that echo and doors that slam like thunder even when it's not raining. There's a lady who smells like flowers and cries at night, and a man who makes the walls shake with his voice. Uncle Victor says some houses are storms, even on sunny days." The room was very still. Dr. Blake's eyes flicked to the faint old marks at Lily's forearms, the way she flinched when a cart clattered in the hallway. Lily, the doctor asked gently, "Did anyone at that big house ever hurt you?" The little girl didn't answer right away. She took another ice chip from Daniel and let it dissolve slowly like courage. "Sometimes the house hurts everyone," she said. "Sometimes people forget how to be quiet with their hands." She blinked fast, but no tears fell. "Uncle Victor says names aren't important. He calls me Little Bird. He says birds don't wear names because names are nets." Sophia's voice was almost a breath. "Do you know your last name, Lily?" A small shake of the head. "He says names can find you. And people. He says people can be worse than storms." Daniel stood and crossed to the sink to buy himself a second Rand cool water over his hands and watched it beat across his knuckles. In the mirror, he saw a man who remembered a boy hiding in a closet and begging the night to be gentle. He dried his hands and returned to the chair. "What did you and Uncle Victor do all day?" he asked. Warm and ordinary, inviting her to step out of the dark for a breath. Her face brightened a fraction. "We read by the fire. He makes pancakes that look like moons. We plant tomatoes when the ground is soft. He tells stories about a girl who learns to hear the creek without being afraid of who it might call. When I have bad dreams, he sings. He's not a very good singer," she added with a child's blunt honesty that made Dr. Blake smile, "but I like it anyway." Sophia rose. "I'm going to step outside and see if I can find any records," she said softly. "Sometimes there are old notes about a child who needs help." She gave Daniel a look that said she'd try everything. When the door sighed shut, Lily's gaze caught on the glass panel the world beyond it. A maintenance cart rattled by a mop handle, knocking once against the frame. She flinched and pulled the blanket up to her chin. Daniel leaned in, lowering his voice like a secret. "Okay, let's count the things we can see," he said. "It helps when sounds are too loud. I learned that trick from someone very smart." Her eyes searched his. "Who?" "My little brother," he said. And because the truth deserved its place among the truths she was offering, he added, "He was scared a lot too." He touched the air above the bed rail, not quite touching her hand, letting her choose. 5 things we can see." She glanced around. The blue bear on the shelf, she whispered. "Your badge. The raindrops on the window. The little red light that blinks." She squinted and smiled, small but real. "Your hair is sticking up." He feigned offense and smoothed it down. 4, we can feel the blanket. The tape on my hand. The cold from the ice. The warm from the sun. 3, we can hear beep, she mimicked. Shoes in the hallway. Your breathing. He took a slow, noisy breath on purpose, and she laughed once, a tiny bell in a quiet church. The door opened, and Sophia returned with a tablet pressed to her side like a fragile thing. "I broadened the search," she said carefully. "Checked this county and 3 surrounding. There's no recent missing child report that matches Lily." She hesitated. "Nothing going back several years either. It's unusual." Unusual how Daniel asked, though he already knew by the way his stomach had started to sink. "It can mean a few things," Sophia said. "It can mean someone never reported a child missing, or it can mean a child's records were never created in the first place. No birth certificate, no school, no visits to a doctor under her name." She kept her frown gentle, turning it into concern rather than accusation. "We'll keep looking. Sometimes paper trails are just shy." Lily watched their faces with the preternatural alertness of a child who'd had to read rooms to survive. "Did I do something wrong?" she asked quietly. "Is that why the names are gone?" "No," Daniel said, and the word carried the weight of a promise he meant to keep. "None of this is your fault." A beam of sun climbed the bed rail and fell across Lily's wrist, making the IV tape glow like thin sea glass. She looked at it, then at him. Will you tell me a story? She asked in a voice that was both tentative and hopeful, like a hand extended across a narrow stream. He nodded and pulled the chair even closer, boots braced against the tile. My dad taught me something about trees. He began letting his tone settle into the slow cadence of a front porch evening. There's a kind of oak that bends in a storm. People think the stiff trees are the strong ones, the ones that don't move, but the ones that learn how to lean and then stand up again. They're the ones that keep their roots. Lily's eyes drifted shut as he spoke her breathing evening, as if she were matching her chest to his words. Outside, the day brightened, the last tatters of rain sliding off the world. Dr. Blake stood with her hands in the pockets of her white coat, listening, the line between her brows easing. Sophia set the tablet down and exhaled through her nose, a quiet surrender to the one truth that had been in the room all night, that sometimes the first thing a child needs isn't an answer, but a hand that doesn't let go. When the story ended, Lily was asleep, her forehead finally cool under Dr. Blake's palm. Daniel didn't move. He watched the rise and fall of her chest, the way her fingers had loosened around the blanket, as if setting down a weight. He thought of the creek she'd described, the path with no street, the house that could be a storm. He looked at Sophia and then at the doctor and softly, but with steel in it, said, "Whatever that house was, whoever told her to hide and forget it, ends here." No one contradicted him. The room was full of light, and somewhere a floor buffer whirred, polishing away the last footprints the storm had brought with it. Lily slept, and Daniel kept his chair, his vigil, and his promise. Morning sunlight streamed through the blinds, laying pale gold stripes across the hospital bed, where Lily stirred beneath her blankets. The fever had broken sometime during the night, and her skin was no longer burning under the doctor's hand. For the first time since Daniel had found her on that storm-soaked road, her breathing was even and calm. Daniel sat slouched in the chair, arms folded, chin resting against his chest. He hadn't meant to sleep, but the quiet rhythm of the machines and the soft warmth of the child's hand in his had lulled him at last. When Lily's eyes fluttered open, they went straight to him, her lips curved into the faintest, most fragile smile. "You really stayed," she whispered, voice still scratchy but steadier than before. Daniel blinked awake, rubbing at his neck. He stretched his stiff shoulders and managed a tired smile. "Told you I would, didn't..." Her fingers curled around his again, stronger now, less desperate, but no less certain. "Everyone always leaves," she murmured, as if testing whether the promise would still hold in the daylight. "Not me," Daniel replied quietly, brushing a strand of hair back from her forehead. "Not while you need me." The door pushed open with a gentle squeak, and Dr. Hannah Blake entered, followed closely by Sophia Ramirez carrying her ever-present tablet. The doctor's face brightened at the sight of her patient awake and alert. "Good morning, Lily. You look like a new person already. How are you feeling?" Lily shrugged beneath the blanket, her eyes still fixed on Daniel. "Better. Just tired." Sophia pulled up a chair on the other side of the bed. Her tone was warm but careful, each word placed like a stepping stone across a stream. "That's normal after being so sick, but you're very brave. When you feel up to it, we'd like to ask a few things just to help us understand where you belong. Would that be okay?" Lily hesitated, chewing her lip, then looked at Daniel for reassurance. He nodded once, steady as an anchor. "It's all right, Lily. They're just trying to help." She took a breath. "Okay, but only if you stay." "I'm not moving an inch," he promised, and she finally leaned back against the pillows. Sophia kept her voice soft. "Can you tell me who you live with?" my Uncle Lily said almost instantly. "Uncle Victor. We live in a cabin. It's small, but he built it himself. He says it's safer that way." Daniel leaned forward slightly. "Safer from what, sweetheart?" Her brow furrowed as though the answer was heavy. "From the big house. From the people who might come if they knew where we were." The words landed like stones. Sophia exchanged a glance with Dr. Blake, but didn't interrupt. "What was the big house like?" Lily hugged the blanket closer to her chest. Her voice was hushed, as if she feared the walls might overhear. Loud. Doors slam all the time. The man yells so much the floor shakes. The lady cries. She wears shiny rings that click against the glass when she throws things. "I used to hide." Daniel's jaw tightened. He forced his voice to remain gentle. Did they hurt you, Lily? Her eyes filled with shadows too old for her face. Sometimes the house hurt everyone. Sometimes people forget how to be soft with their hands. Dr. Blake steadied her expression, though her chest tightened with sorrow. She reached for Lily's wrist, pretending to check the IV, but mostly to give the child something grounding. No one here will forget Lily. You're safe now. Lily's eyes flicked up, searching Daniel's again. Uncle Victor said names can find you, so I don't use one. He calls me Little Bird. He says birds don't wear names because names are nets. Sophia wrote the words down slowly. Do you remember any other name? Maybe from the big house? Lily shook her head. Only when I dream. Sometimes people call me different names in dreams. I don't know which ones are real. Daniel reached across gently, taking her hand. Dreams can feel real, but we'll help you figure out what's true. You're not alone in this anymore. The little girl squeezed his fingers. She seemed to wrestle with something, her gaze darting between the adults in the room. Finally, she whispered, Uncle Victor says he saved me. He says if the bad people found me, they'd take me back. And then terrible things would happen. Terrible things like what Sophia asked softly. Her face tightened and she shook her head. He said I must never tell. He said it would break everything. A silence settled over the room, filled only by the steady beep of the monitor. Daniel could see her trembling, torn between loyalty and fear. He leaned closer, lowering his voice. Lily, you're brave for telling us what you already have. No matter what secrets you carry, you don't have to carry them alone anymore. I'll help you hold them all right. She looked at him for a long moment, then laid her head back on the pillow. Okay, she said faintly. Just then the door opened and Captain Mason Grant stepped in. His presence filled the space like a shadow. His eyes landed on Daniel first, then on the small figure in the bed. Hayes, a word. Daniel's chest tightened. He knew what was coming. He stood reluctantly, prying his hand gently from Lily's. Her eyes widened with alarm. You're coming back! He crouched down so their faces were level. Of course. I always come back. Only then did she let go. In the corridor, Mason's voice was low but sharp. You're over the line, Hayes. You're letting your personal demons turn you into something this department can't afford. She's not your responsibility. She trusts me, Daniel said evenly. You saw it yourself. That girl has been through hell, and if me sitting in a chair helps her heal, I'll do it. That's not the point, Mason snapped. Protocol exists for a reason. Child Services has specialists trained for this. You are not her father. The word stung, but Daniel didn't flinch. No. But I am the one who found her, and right now I'm the only one she'll talk to. That has to matter. Mason's jaw worked, frustration etched deep in his features. It matters less than the law. Step back, Hayes. That's an order. Daniel stood silent for a moment, fists clenched at his sides before finally nodding stiffly. Yes, sir. When he returned to the room, Lily's eyes locked onto him instantly. Relief softened her small features. She reached out and he sat back down without hesitation, taking her hand once more. You came back, she said, her voice full of quiet wonder as though she still couldn't believe it. I promised. Daniel whispered, and in that moment he knew the hardest fight was only beginning. Not against storms or illness, but against rules that demanded distance when his heart knew the child needed him close. The sunlight outside grew stronger, warming the windowsill. In the bed, Lily's breathing steadied again as she drifted back towards sleep, holding his hand with the unshakable grip of a child who had finally found an anchor she believed would never let go. The hours passed slowly inside evergreen general sunlight, climbing from the pale gold of early morning into a fuller brightness that spilled across the hospital floor. Nurses came and went, checking IV lines, recording vitals, but the atmosphere in Lily's room remained strangely intimate, anchored by the quiet presence of Officer Daniel Hayes at her bedside. He had moved only to stretch his legs, refusing to leave the chair where he could keep her within arm's reach. The child seemed calmer with him there, though every time the door opened, she tensed her small fingers, tightening around the blanket as if prepared to bolt. By mid-afternoon, Dr. Hannah Blake returned with Sophia Ramirez. Their voices were low, gentle, carrying the gravity of people who understood how fragile a child's trust could be. Daniel rose when they entered, but Lily immediately reached for his sleeve. Stay, she whispered. I'm right here, he said, settling back into the chair. Sophia perched on the edge of the bed, smiling warmly. Lily, you've been very brave. We were hoping you could tell us a little more about your uncle, the one you called Victor. The girl's lashes fluttered nervously. You won't take me away if I tell no one's taking you anywhere today, Sophia assured her. We just want to understand your story. Lily's voice was soft, hesitant. Uncle Victor says we have to stay hidden. He says the world outside is full of people who don't understand. He says secrets keep us safe. Daniel leaned forward, resting his forearms on his knees. What kind of secrets, Lily? She hesitated, then picked at the edge of her blanket. About who I really am. About the big house I lived in before. The words drew the air taut. Daniel felt the opening of a door into whatever shadows lay behind her fear. He kept his tone even, as though they were simply talking about books. What do you remember about that house? Her brow furrowed, lips pressing together. It was huge, too many rooms, stairs that echoed when you ran. The man shouted a lot. Doors slammed so hard it made me cover my ears. The lady wore shiny rings. She cried and sometimes threw things. I used to hide under the table or in the garden. That's where Uncle Victor found me. Dr. Blake's eyes softened. Did the man or lady ever hurt you? Lily's shoulders hunched. Sometimes, not like hitting hard, more like forgetting I was there, forgetting to feed me, forgetting not to yell so close it made my chest shake. Her voice cracked and Daniel instinctively reached for her hand. She gripped it tightly, grounding herself. Sophia's expression flickered with both sadness and determination. And Uncle Victor took you away from that. The girl nodded. He said I didn't have to listen to the storms anymore. He called me his little bird. He said little birds don't belong in cages. Daniel felt something twist deep inside. There was tenderness in those words, but also an unsettling finality. An adult's decision sealed over a child's life. Lily, he asked gently, do you remember how long you've lived in the cabin? She tilted her head, thinking. Forever, I think. Since I was really little. But her small fingers traced circles on the blanket. Sometimes I dream of another name. People call me Grace. I don't know if it's real or if it's just a dream name. The room went utterly still. Sophia's pen hovered above her notebook, then slowly moved. Daniel's gaze locked on Lily's face, searching for truth in her eyes. She was trembling now, caught between fear and relief at speaking words that had waited too long. Grace Daniel repeated softly as if testing the sound. Do you like that name? I don't know, she admitted. It feels heavy, like a key that opens a door to a place I don't want to go back to. Sophia leaned in carefully. Did Uncle Victor ever tell you that you used to be called Grace? The girl's eyes darted toward the window as though she could still see the trees outside her hidden cabin. No. He just said names could find you, but sometimes, when I looked in the mirror, I didn't feel like Lily. I felt like someone pretending to be Lily. Dr. Blake rested a reassuring hand on the blanket. You're not pretending now, sweetheart. You're here and you're safe. Whatever your name is will help you find the truth. At that moment, the door swung open with more force than usual, and Captain Mason Grant stepped inside. His expression was stern, his gaze landing squarely on Daniel. Hayes hallway. Now. Daniel stiffened but squeezed Lily's hand before rising. I'll be right back, he promised. Her eyes were wide, but she nodded, clutching the blanket like armor. In the hallway, Mason crossed his arms. I warned you, Hayes. You're in too deep. This child isn't your responsibility. We're assigning Detective Morrison for missing persons. You're off this case effective immediately. Daniel's jaw tightened. With respect, sir, she won't talk to anyone else. She trusts me. That's exactly why you need to step back. Emotional entanglement clouds judgment. This is bigger than you think. Daniel shook his head, frustration boiling beneath his calm exterior. She's a scared little girl. If my presence helps her feel safe enough to talk, then that's not a liability. It's a lifeline. Mason's voice hardened. It's an order, Hayes. Step aside. The words struck like a hammer. Daniel swallowed the retort burning on his tongue, nodded stiffly, and returned to the room. Inside, Lily's eyes locked on him the instant he entered. Her small shoulders relaxed with visible relief. You came back. Daniel forced a smile and sat down once more. Of course I did. Promises are promises. She reached for his hand again and he clasped it, heart heavy with the knowledge that his grip might soon be pried loose by authority stronger than promises. Dr. Blake moved closer, lowering her voice. She's asking for you specifically, Daniel. In all my years, I've rarely seen a child attach this quickly. That's not nothing. Lily's eyelids drooped, fatigue pulling at her. Will you stay until I fall asleep? The dreams come when I'm alone. Daniel smoothed her hair, his voice low and steady. I'll be here. Her breathing slowed as she drifted toward sleep, but just before slipping under, she whispered something that silenced the room. He told me. I could never tell anyone where I really came from. Daniel sat frozen, her small hand still warm in his. Outside the window, the afternoon sun broke through the clouds, but inside shadows lingered. For the first time, he felt the edges of something far larger than illness or fear. A truth buried so deep, it threatened to unravel everything they thought they knew. The next morning arrived with a quiet brightness, a band of sunlight slipping through the blinds and laying soft rectangles across the foot of the bed. The storm smell had long since bled from the air, replaced by antiseptic, and the faint sweetness of apple juice warming on the tray. Lily slept on her side, one hand curled beneath her cheek, the IV tape neat and unbothered. Officer Daniel Hayes had drifted off for a moment in the chair, his elbows on his knees, but the first sound of the door latch turned his head. He sat up straight before his eyes were fully open. Dr. Hannah Blake came in with a stethoscope around her neck and a humor-softened seriousness in her eyes. Morning, Officer Hayes. She checked the monitor. Temperature's holding at 99.2. That's a very good number. Feels like a gift, he said, voice husky with too little sleep. He glanced at the child as if gratitude should be directed there. Sophia Ramirez followed with a small bowl of oatmeal and a plastic spoon. We'll try a few bites when she wakes, she said, setting it down. No pressure. A second knock, firmer official preceded Captain Mason Grant. Behind him, a woman stepped in, early 40s, neat suit hair collected in an efficient knot. Her eyes, however, were kind. Mason's tone announced her before he spoke. Detective Elaine Morrison. Missing persons. Daniel stood out of habit. Morrison extended her hand. Her grip was cool and even. Officer Hayes. I've read your report. She looked past him to the sleeping girl. May I? Dr. Blake nodded. She's stable. If she wakes, keep questions gentle. Always, Morrison said, and there was nothing performative about the word. She moved closer to the bed and took in details with a quick practice sweep, the way Lily's fingers twitched when footsteps sounded in the hall, the healed bruise shadows on her shins, the small crescent scar near her hairline that only shows when a child has grown up outdoors. Lily's lashes fluttered. She blinked into the light, then found Daniel like a compass needle. You're here, she whispered, as if confirming reality before choosing to participate in it. I am, he said, leaning forward so she could see his face. How's the world this morning? Not so loud, she murmured. When she noticed the oatmeal, her mouth quirked. That's not pancakes. We'll file a formal complaint with the pancake department. Daniel said the joke soft enough to pass a nurse's muster. One bite. You pick the spoon. She accepted the spoon, took a small taste, and wrinkled her nose. Okay, she conceded. Maybe 3 bites. Morrison drew a chair close, but not too close. Hi, Lily. I'm Elaine. Is it all right if I sit here? Lily glanced at Daniel. He nodded once. She asks easy questions, he said in a mock whisper. Morrison smiled without showing teeth. I like easy questions. Like, what's your favorite thing to plant tomatoes? Lily said, surprising herself with how quickly the answer came. They smell like sunshine even when it's raining. That's a very good reason, Morrison said. Who taught you to plant them? Lily's eyes slid to the blanket, then back. My uncle. Uncle Victor. Morrison didn't write the name yet. She kept her voice at garden voice level. What does Uncle Victor do? He builds things. The cabin. My swing. Lily's fingers drew circles in the sheet. He smells like pine, and sometimes like smoke from the stove when it's cold. Do you go to town together? Morrison asked, like she was asking whether Lily preferred red or cherry tomatoes. Lily shook her head. He goes. The store remembers faces. He says mine should be a secret. Across the bed, Sophia's pencil stilled. Dr. Blake didn't move her eyes from the child, but Daniel saw the quiet exchange between the women there. It was the first visible seam in whatever story would be told later. "Do you see a doctor sometimes?" Morrison asked gently. Lily's grip tightened on the spoon. "Uncle Victor learned how. He says doctors write names on paper and the paper grows legs." She swallowed and looked at Daniel. "He says paper can find you." Morrison let a slow breath out through her nose. "Does your uncle have a last name?" "He says last names are nets." Then after a beat, "He calls me Little Bird." Morrison leaned back, allowing space to refill the room. "Would you like to draw something for me, Lily?" "Anything you want." "I like pictures better than words sometimes." Lily hesitated, then nodded. Sophia passed a clipboard and Morrison offered a small flowered pencil clearly purchased with this moment in mind. Lily began with lines that were sure of themselves. 2 tall trunks, a loop of rope between them. A seat at the end of the rope. Then a porch rectangles for windows smoke like a ribbon. She drew a creek and blue pen, jagged and talking. A small figure at the swing legs, out hair like rain. "What's that?" Daniel asked softly. Not because he didn't know, but because naming gives children permission to claim their life out loud. "My swing," Lily said. "You can touch the sky if you push at the right time." After a minute, she turned the pencil and started another page. This time, the lines were heavier. A big house with many windows, an arched door. She pressed hard when she drew the door and the paper furred. Tiny stick people near it, their mouths little open circles. She added a tiny oval near a corner. "Roses," she said, and then startled as if a word had escaped on its own. "I don't know why I said that." "It's okay," Morrison said quickly. "You did great." She looked to Dr. Blake. "May I get her height and weight history, if any?" "None on file," the doctor said quietly. "No electronic footprint. Immunizations are uncertain. I see old scrapes, nothing acute besides the fever and dehydration." Mason shifted in the doorway. Impatience wrapped in a coat. Detective Morrison rose. "I'll need an hour to broaden the search radius for missing children, older cases too. I want to cross-check any reports that mention a gardener or cabin. Also off-grid homeschooling petitions if any were filed, though." She let the sentence dangle. Off-grid doesn't usually file petitions. When they stepped into the corridor, Mason lowered his voice. "You see the problem? Hayes is woven into this. I want him off." Morrison studied Daniel through the glass panel. He was pointing at the drawing of the creek, letting Lily teach him how it talked at night. The child's shoulders were down for the first time. "With respect, Captain, the child is regulated when he's in the room. Remove him and you'll lose your narrator. We don't have another. He's compromised. He's effective." Morrison said, "Not combative, just factual. Let me set the guardrails. He sits. He doesn't lead questions. He stays in view. If she dissociates, he grounds her. Without that, you'll get a shutdown and a half-truth." Mason's mouth flattened. He didn't like conceding, but he liked closed cases. "Guardrails," he said at last, and walked off heels, issuing tiny verdicts on the floor. Sophia lingered. "I'm going to expand statewide and adjoining states," she told Morrison. "Name unknown, age 7-ish, possibly used another name. I'll search for uncle plus cabin in narrative notes." "Good," Morrison said. "Also check older sightings. You'd be surprised how many reports die in a file because no one knew which thread to tug." When they re-entered, Lily had set the pencil down, the fatigue that trails fever pressing her eyelids. She looked at Morrison as if weighing how much of herself she could afford to hand over today. "Am I in trouble?" she asked, and the question carried years. "No," Morrison said, and the word didn't wobble. "You're brave. Grown-ups around you didn't do their jobs. That's not on you." Lily's eyes shifted to Daniel. "Do you get in trouble if you stay?" Daniel's mouth twitched. "Only if I snore," he said, which earned him a ghost of a smile. He eased back into the chair and by unspoken agreement resumed the steady breathing game. 5 things we can see: the sunlight, the cup, the blue bear, your shoes. Her hair, Lily whispered, nodding toward Dr. Blake. 4 we can feel: the blanket, the tape, the pillow, The warm on my face. 3 we can hear. Beep, she said. Footsteps. Your voice. Her body softened the fierce little sentry inside, finally allowing a watch change. Her hand found the blanket edge and petted it like an animal, an old self-soothing that had served her in a house that thundered. Daniel watched her eyes close, watched the crease between her brows ease as sleep pulled her down without tricking her this time. Morrison stood with her notebook at her side and the drawings carefully tucked beneath it. She looked at the child, then at Daniel. Officer Hayes, she said quietly, when she wakes later, I'll need you in the room. Same chair, same breathing. I'll do the talking, but you'll be, the anchor. He nodded. The word felt exactly right. Outside, a line of clouds like distant mountains cleared the edge of the town, and sunlight gathered itself for an honest afternoon. Inside, the oatmeal cooled forgotten. Dr. Blake adjusted the IV with the easy tenderness of someone who knew the difference between needles and harm. Sophia's fingers moved fast over her tablet in the corner, already tugging threads the old storm had left tangled. And Daniel, settling his weight back into the chair, eased his boots against the tile and kept his small promise with a steadiness that made bigger promises possible. He watched Lily sleep. He watched the rise and fall of her breath. He watched for any shadow that might try to come take her back and found that for the first time since the rain, the room felt like a place where the paper couldn't find her, not while he could be found by her first. Detective Morrison returned later that afternoon, the drawings Lily had made still tucked inside her folder, though now they had been copied and cataloged. She entered the hospital room with a calm that wasn't feigned. It was the same presence she had practiced for years, the one children sensed without words. Daniel Hayes rose when she came in, but she gestured for him to sit back down. Lily had woken not long ago and was idly playing with the edge of her blanket, her eyes half on the blue teddy bear Sophia had brought and half on the voices that seemed to decide her future whenever the adult spoke. Dr. Blake stood at the monitor scanning the slow improvements. She's holding steady. We've lowered the IV fluid slightly. That's a good sign, she explained softly. Lily tilted her head toward Daniel. What does that mean? It means your body's working on its own again, he said, leaning forward, resting his arms on his knees. That's your strength showing. She considered that, then tugged the bear closer. I don't feel strong, just sleepy. Sometimes being strong is letting yourself rest, Daniel replied. Morrison took that moment to ease into the chair beside Lily's bed. I liked your pictures, she said, her tone casual, as if she were talking about flowers in a neighbor's yard. You draw like someone who remembers what she sees. Lily's lashes flickered. I remember the swing best, she admitted, the way the rope burned if you held it too tight, and the sound of the creak when I was supposed to be asleep. That's a good memory, Morrison said. She paused. Do you remember anyone else at the cabin besides your uncle? The child's fingers stopped moving. Her gaze shifted toward Daniel before she whispered, a woman sometimes. She came in spring. She wore gloves when she planted. Uncle Victor called her Aunt May, but she wasn't really my aunt. Daniel's pulse ticked faster, but he kept his face still. Morrison only nodded. What color were her gloves? Yellow. The kind you use for washing dishes, but she used them for dirt. She laughed like glass, and when she left, she cried. That admission seemed to cost Lily something. She drew the blanket higher as though the memory carried a chill. Daniel reached out not to touch her, but to anchor with his voice. You're safe saying these things here. No one can take them from you now. Lily's eyes softened, but she didn't answer. Instead, she leaned into the pillow, retreating behind the fortress of her own silence. Morrison accepted the pause without pushing. She turned instead to Daniel. Captain Grant wants to begin a field search, she said quietly. The drawings give us enough to start mapping. A cabin, a swing, a creek, possibly a rose bush near a large house. It's more than we had this morning. Will you take her with you? Lily asked suddenly, surprising them both. No, sweetheart, Morrison said quickly. You stay here and get stronger. The grown-ups will look. That's our job. The little girl nodded slowly, though her hand clutched the bear tighter. Sophia entered moments later with a tablet in her hands, the glow reflected in her glasses. Detective, I've cross-referenced missing children's reports over the last 5 years. There are 2 possible matches. One from a neighboring county girl reported missing at age 3. Another case from across the state line. Both have gaps, no follow-up. Morrison accepted the information, her mind already spinning threads. Get me the parents' contacts. Quietly. We don't want to stir false hope until we're sure. Dr. Blake lowered the volume on the monitor, muting its beeps so Lily could drift without constant reminders of machines. She'll need rest again soon, she warned. Fever recovery is like climbing a hill, up, down, up, down. Don't expect too much stamina. Daniel listened, though his eyes never left the child. Each word she had spoken sat heavy in his chest, not because of the case file it created, but because each detail revealed another layer of the life she had been forced into, half-hidden, half-remembered. When Morrison stepped into the hall with Sophia, Daniel followed. The corridor smelled of sanitizer and coffee. She trusts you, Morrison said without looking at him. Daniel crossed his arms. I didn't ask for that. No, Morrison said, but she gave it anyway. Don't underestimate how rare that is. She deserves more than a cop who stumbled into her story, Daniel muttered. She deserves consistency, Morrison corrected. And you're consistent, so you'll stay. Captain Grant was waiting at the nurse's station. He spread a map across the counter, tapping at a shaded region north of town. National forest land, sparse patrols, multiple trails. This creek here could match her drawing. We'll need aerial support, Morrison said, circling the area with her pen. Cabins get tucked into hollows out there. Hard to find from the ground. Grant frowned. You think the uncle's still around if he believes the child is hidden in plain sight here? He might come back to confirm, Morrison replied. Daniel's gut tightened. Then we need eyes on this building too. Grant gave him a look, but Morrison nodded. Agreed. Survivors often fear being reclaimed. We'll put security on rotation. Back inside, Lily had drifted into sleep again, her hand still gripping the bear. Daniel sank into the chair beside her, watching the rise and fall of her breath. Each cycle steadied him as much as it did her. The storm outside had long since passed, but inside this room, another storm waited, questions without answers, truths only a child could unlock. As the sun began to lower, painting the blinds in bars of gold, Morrison quietly gathered her notes. Tomorrow we start the search, she said. Daniel didn't look up from Lily. Then tomorrow, make sure we come back with something worth her trust. The room settled into quiet, only the soft hum of machines and the distant murmur of voices beyond the door. And in that silence, a promise hung unspoken, fragile but real. That no matter how many nets of paper or memories of cabins lingered, the child was no longer alone in telling her story. By the time morning thinned into a bright, steady light, the hospital had settled into its weekday rhythm, soft wheels against linoleum. The distant hiss of coffee nurses talking in gentler voices because a child in room 314 slept between sentences. The plan Detective Morrison had sketched the night before was already quietly in motion, requests for aerial passes over the North Woods, a map marked with a creek that talked at night. Security posted at the elevators just in case the pass tried to walk through the doors dressed as a visitor. Daniel Hayes took it in with a nod and a paper cup warming his palm. He would not leave the chair by the bed, not today. Lily, sometimes a name that lived inside her dreams, dozed and stirred in small loops. Each time she woke, her eyes went first to Daniel. He answered with the same unremarkable sentence, I'm here. It was unremarkable only to adults. To a child who had measured safety by footsteps in a hallway and the slam of doors, it was everything. Shortly before 10, a ripple crossed the nurse's station. It wasn't loud. It was the kind of quiet that pulls attention by accident, the sudden hush when someone leans in and says a name softly. Daniel stood before he knew why. Through the glass, he saw a tall man at the desk, gray at the temples, shoulders, squared in a way that looked like habit rather than pride. His clothes carried the forest with them, worn canvas, the scent of pine and wood smoke that clung like a story you couldn't wash out. He held papers in one hand, crumpled slightly at the corners from being gripped too hard. I'm looking for my niece, the man said, low and urgent. Her name is... He hesitated, then recovered. She answers to Lily. Sophia was already moving. Morrison appeared from nowhere, as if the floor itself had delivered her. Her voice was even. Sir, I'm Detective Morrison. And you are Victor, he said. Victor Hale. The name landed between them like a key that might fit too many doors. He offered the papers. I'm her legal guardian. She ran off during the storm. I've been searching since. Morrison didn't look down immediately. She looked at him. Is Lily safe with you, Mr. Hale? Of course, he said too fast. Then, softer, almost breaking, I've kept her safe for years. Inside 314, Lily's head turned toward the corridor as if the world had whispered her name without sound. She sat up the way frightened animals do without moving anything that might be heard. Her eyes found Daniel's. Someone's here, she breathed. He glanced through the window and saw Morrison guiding the man to a side room. He stepped closer to the bed. You're safe, he said, because that was true whether or not another truth had arrived. Do you know who it is? She chewed her lip until it paled. I think it's him. Do you want to see him? Daniel asked the question wrapped in permission rather than pressure. Her fingers curled in the blanket. Only if you stay. I'll be right here, he said, and he meant the words with the stubborn sincerity of a man who had learned the cost of saying them too late. In the consultation room, Morrison slid the papers across to Sophia while keeping her attention on Victor. Tell me what happened yesterday. He folded his hands on the table, then unfolded them as if the story wouldn't sit still. She's had episodes, he said. Flashbacks. She gets confused about before. I went to town for supplies. When I came back, she was gone. I thought maybe she'd head toward the road, but the storm... He swallowed. I couldn't see. I searched all night. I only stopped to ask here because I saw a patrol car I recognized. From the news, Morrison asked mildly. From town, he said, choosing the smaller lie or the larger truth. It was hard to tell. Officer Hayes. He's decent. Sophia returned the papers, her voice careful. These are copies of a guardianship form and therapy notes. They're not recent. She let that sit. We'll verify. Victor nodded, but his body said he needed to see the child before any verification could make sense of his world again. Please, he said. I need to know she's all right. Morrison studied him for another beat and then stood. You can see her briefly under supervision. There are rules. You don't remove her from the bed. You don't ask her to keep secrets. You answer questions put to you. If she shows signs of distress, we'll pause. I would never... He stopped because love and harm are not always far enough apart to look different to strangers. I understand. When they entered the room, Dr. Hannah Blake had already lowered the lights to a warmer shade. She took Lily's pulse with hands that were as much comfort as instrument, then stepped back. Victor paused on the threshold. He looked older up close, not in years but in miles traveled without sleep. For a fraction of a second he seemed unsure how to begin. Then he smiled in a way that made him look like the man a child might trust in a garden. Hello, little bird, he said. Lily didn't run to him. She didn't recoil either. She looked down at her hands and then back up, and a small sound left her that wasn't a word. Uncle Victor. Daniel felt her shift toward him by the width of a breath. He didn't move his chair. He didn't move at all. Victor took a single step closer, then stopped, honoring a line no one had drawn but everyone understood. I've been worried sick, he said, voice rough with the gravel of the road and other things. Are you hurt? She had a high fever, Dr. Blake answered evenly. It's down now. She's dehydrated but improving. Victor nodded, grateful in a way that knocked him off balance. His eyes went to the IV as if memorizing the exact angle of the tape so he could make it right again later out, where he knew how to fix things. Do you need anything? He asked Lily. Your book. The one about the girl and the creek. Her throat dipped. Did you bring it? I didn't. I came as soon as... He stopped, aware that the sentence would tilt into pleading if he chased it. He looked at Daniel, a man measuring another man's usefulness by the way a child breathed around him. Officer Hayes. He said a nod that was almost thanks. Daniel answered with nothing more than a steady look. He had many words. None of them would have served Lily. Morrison's voice set the boundary back on the floor. Mr. Hale. Can you tell Lily why she needed to stay hidden? Victor's shoulders sloped as if he had been expecting the question in a room with fewer witnesses. Because people can be loud, he said. Choosing the small truth first. Because some houses are storms. Because I promised to keep her safe. Safe from whom, Morrison asked. He closed his eyes for a second, the universe of a second in which a man decides whether to double down or unspool. When he opened them, he looked at Lily, and the answer he gave was not to the detective. From anyone who forgot how to be gentle, he said, from anyone who didn't see you. He took a breath. From my own fear. Lily's small hand moved over the blanket. It felt like a surrender, or maybe like starting again. Why do I sometimes dream my name is Grace? She asked, the syllables landing with the soft violence of a bell rung in an empty church. The room drew in around the question. Daniel watched Victor's face blanch and then color again like a tide, trying to decide whether to claim the shore or leave it. Dr. Blake's fingers touched the edge of the bed rail, a quiet brace. Sophia held her pen above the page but didn't write. Victor's voice went soft as a night story. You are my Lily, he said. You are my little bird. That wasn't the question, Morrison said gently, but without drifting from the truth. Does she have another name, Mr. Hale? He worked his jaw once the way men do when either answer will cost them. She had a different life, he said at last, in a big house, with people who loved her the way they knew how. He looked at the floor. It wasn't enough. Lily's eyes shone not with tears yet, but with water gathering. Did I do something wrong, she asked, because children will spend themselves first to purchase the piece of the room. No. Daniel said immediately the word firm, a post set in wet concrete. You did nothing wrong. Victor nodded fast, grateful that someone had said it out loud so he could say it too. Never, he added. You never did anything wrong. The monitor kept its metronome steady, as a heart learning a new tempo. Outside, a cloud crossed the sun, and the room cooled by a degree enough to notice. Morrison made a small note, not a verdict, a breadcrumb. Dr. Blake checked the drip and stepped back into the soft light. Sophia waited the way you wait when a story is starting to tell itself. Lily swallowed. If I'm your little bird, she said, voice small and brave at the same time. Why do I feel like I'm two people when I close my eyes? Victor's mouth trembled. Because I split the world in half to keep you, he said, and the sentence was the truest thing he had touched all morning. No one moved. The truth sat between them, not yet sorted into files and charges and courtrooms. For now it was simply a child, a man who had carried her out of a storm, and another who had kept her from one, both of them learning that love and fear can build houses with walls you can't live in forever. Daniel stayed in the chair anchor and witnessed his hand resting on the bed's edge where she could find it without looking. And the day went on ordinary footsteps in the hall, the scent of coffee renewing itself while inside the small room, the past and present faced each other, and for the first time did not look away. The day bent slowly into afternoon, each hour carrying with it the soft strain of questions no one yet dared put into final form. The hospital corridors bustled in their usual patterns, but inside Lily's room time felt like it had thickened, slowed to a pace that let every word hang too long. Daniel sat close as always, his chair angled so that Lily could see him without effort. Victor remained near the foot of the bed, careful not to intrude. Morrison and Sophia notebooks, half filled with observations, leaned quietly against the wall. Dr. Blake shifted between gentle monitoring and simply standing still, present more as assurance than physician. It was Lily who broke the quiet first in the frank way children sometimes do. Why did you call me your little bird? She asked, eyes trained on Victor, her voice barely stronger than a whisper but steadier than before. Victor's smile came slowly, softened by regret. Because you were so small when I first carried you, he said, and you'd curl against me trembling like wings in a storm. I thought if I called you that, you'd remember you could fly free one day. Her eyes watered confusion, threading with something like longing. She turned to Daniel, silently asking if it was safe to trust what she heard. Daniel's nod came gentle, unpressured. He's answering you, he said softly. It's okay to listen. Victor's voice lowered, filled with things he had never planned to say aloud. I know it feels like two lives pulling at you. I tried to protect you, but maybe I made the world smaller than it should have been. He hesitated, looking down at his own hands. I wanted you to believe you belonged somewhere, even if it was only with me. The child's lips parted, her voice catching in her throat. But did I have another name? The question struck the air like a stone breaking surface tension. Morrison's pen paused mid-stroke. Dr. Blake shifted subtly closer to Lily's side, protective by instinct. Daniel held his breath. Victor lifted his eyes, shadowed with years of keeping secrets. Yes, he admitted the word trembling. Before. You were Grace. He said it carefully, reverently, as if placing a fragile shell in her hand. The syllables landed in her chest like something half-remembered. She repeated it softly, testing it. Grace. Tears welled as though a door had opened inside her. That's why it feels like I'm two. Daniel's heart clenched. He reached out, resting his palm lightly on the blanket near hers. You are whole, he said gently. No matter which name you remember, you are still you. Victor nodded, his throat working hard. Grace or Lily, you're the same child I swore to keep safe. I never wanted you to think you'd done anything wrong. His voice cracked on the last word, and he pressed a hand to his mouth, fighting emotion. Morrison stepped in her tone, measured but not cold. Mr. Hale, we'll need to verify everything. Where she came from, what led her here. Do you understand? He let out a long breath. I do. His eyes went back to Lily, guilt threaded with desperate love. But whatever happens, please don't let her think she's alone. The weight in his words pulled the room into a heavy silence. Lily shifted closer to Daniel, who instinctively angled his body to shield her from the storm of adult truths. She whispered, Will you still be here tonight? Daniel didn't hesitate. I'll be here, he promised. Her shoulders eased a fraction. She looked at Victor again, a tremor in her voice. If I was Grace, where's my mom? The question froze Victor. His mouth opened, then closed again, as if the answer lived on a cliff edge he was afraid to fall from. Morrison's gaze sharpened, waiting. Sophia held her breath. Finally, Victor spoke, his voice barely audible. She's gone, little bird. He blinked hard. She died when you were very small. The word shook the air. Lily's face crumpled, not fully understanding, but sensing the loss stitched inside. Daniel leaned forward quickly, his hand covering hers. It's not your fault, he said firmly. Knowing children blame themselves for storms they never caused. None of this is your fault. She turned into his steady presence, clutching his sleeve. Her tears fell fast, soaking the cotton, while Victor stood rooted, shaking with his own helpless grief. Dr. Blake moved in, adjusting the IV, but really giving them a moment to breathe. Let's slow down, she murmured. Too much at once can drown even the strongest heart. Morrison nodded. We'll pause here, she said quietly. She gestured toward Victor. You'll stay available, Mr. Hale, but right now she needs calm. Victor bowed his head. He looked once more at Lily, his expression a storm of love, regret, and fear, then stepped out of the room, escorted by Sophia. The door closed gently, and the hush that followed was almost a relief. Lily sniffled, still holding Daniel's sleeve. Why does everything feel heavy? She whispered. Because you're remembering big things, Daniel said softly, brushing her damp hair back from her forehead. But you don't have to carry them alone. We'll carry them with you. Her sobs slowed, giving way to a tired silence. She leaned against the pillows, her small body curling in on itself like a sparrow after rain. Daniel stayed right where he was, his presence steady as stone. Morrison watched from the corner. Her expression softened, despite years of practice keeping it neutral. She knew the investigation was only beginning, but in this room what mattered most was the fragile tether of trust between a frightened child and the man who refused to let go of her hand. When Lily finally drifted into a light sleep, Daniel exhaled deeply, exhaustion tugging at him. He looked at Morrison. Whatever comes next, he said, promise me she won't be alone in it. The detective's eyes met his. You have my word, she said. Daniel settled back, hand still near Lily's. Outside the hospital hummed as usual, but within the small room, grief and comfort mingled, an unfinished story written across the faces of those who refused to turn away. The afternoon light lengthened, painting soft gold across the floor, a reminder that even on days shadowed by truth, warmth still reached through the window. The evening pressed gently against the hospital windows, painting the sky in layers of rose and gray. In Lily's room, the hum of machines blended with the faint sound of her breathing steady now in her sleep. Daniel sat still, his hand resting near hers on the blanket. He had promised not to leave, and even in his exhaustion, he kept the promise. His eyes stung from the long hours, but his body refused to loosen from the chair. He knew if she woke and found him gone, the fragile trust they'd built might fracture. Detective Morrison returned quietly, a folder tucked beneath her arm. She glanced at Daniel before speaking, her voice softened. "She's resting." "That's good. But we'll need to talk." Daniel gave a tired nod. Out there, he murmured, unwilling to disturb the child's sleep. They stepped into the corridor. The air outside the room felt cooler, the polished linoleum stretching endlessly beneath fluorescent lights. Morrison handed him the folder. "We've pulled what we can." The man Victor Hale, his records are thin, almost deliberately so. He kept himself off-grid, moved towns often, always working under odd jobs, always renting small places. It lines up with someone who didn't want to be found. Daniel opened the folder, scanning through pages of notes and photocopies. But why take her? His voice carried both anger and bewilderment. If her name was Grace, if she had a family, why keep her hidden? That's the question. Morrison folded her arms. "We found a death certificate for her mother. Accidental fire 7 years ago. The child's name, Grace, was listed as missing after the incident. Victor appears in the timeline right after. Neighbors remember him suddenly arriving in the area with a little girl. He claimed she was his niece." Daniel's chest tightened, so he wasn't lying when he said he tried to protect her. He really did pick her up from something awful. Protection, Morrison said carefully, but through secrecy. He denied her any connection to her past, and that has its own damage. Daniel closed the folder, fighting the heaviness inside. She deserves the truth, but not all at once. She's just a child. Morrison studied him, then nodded. Agreed. We'll go slow. But know this, there may be extended family who never stopped looking. This could open doors we can't close again. Back inside, Lily stirred. Her small frame shifted against the pillow, her lashes fluttering open. She blinked at Daniel, first relief washing over her features when she saw him still there. "You didn't leave," she whispered. "Never." Daniel set his hand, reaching hers again. "I told you I'd stay." She looked past him, spotting Morrison. "Is he gone?" she asked. "Meaning Victor?" "Yes," Morrison replied gently. "He's resting in another room for now. You don't have to see him unless you want to." Lily's brow furrowed, her thoughts catching on the words she had whispered earlier. "But if I'm Grace, does that mean I don't belong to Lily anymore?" Daniel leaned closer, shaking his head firmly. "You belong to yourself. Grace or Lily, you are you. A name can't change that." His tone wrapped around her like a blanket, steady and sure. Tears welled in her eyes. "But I feel like I lost something, like I'm standing in two places at the same time and I can't move." Daniel swallowed the ache in his throat. "That's because you're remembering. It hurts, but it doesn't mean you're broken. It means your story is bigger than you thought." Morrison, who had seen countless children bruised by life's storms, found herself blinking hard. Her professional detachment eroded by the weight of the girl's words. Lily sniffled, turning her face into Daniel's sleeve. "I just want to go home," she said. The words struck Daniel like a bell. He stroked her hair, whispering, "We'll find out where that is together. And until then, you're not alone." The door creaked as Dr. Blake entered carrying a chart. Her presence always seemed to bring calm, like the low tide after a storm. She checked the monitors and then crouched beside the bed. "How are you feeling, sweetheart?" Lily wiped her cheeks clumsily. "Tired and heavy." Dr. Blake nodded. "That makes sense. Your heart's carrying big things. But it's strong. You're strong." She looked at Daniel. She needs rest, but she also needs stability. The familiar voices she trusts, faces she can count on. "I'll stay," Daniel said without hesitation. Morrison added quietly, "We'll rotate officers nearby. She'll be safe." As the evening deepened into night, the hospital grew quieter. Lily drifted again towards sleep this time, with Daniel's hand resting steady over hers. Morrison excused herself, and Dr. Blake dimmed the lights before leaving them in a pool of gentle shadow. Daniel sat back, fatigue creeping in, but his heart unwilling to let go. He found himself whispering into the quiet words meant for her, though she already slept. "You are not lost. Not anymore." For a long time, he just listened to her breathing, steady and rhythmic, the sound anchoring him to the moment. Outside, a storm brushed against the windows, rain tapping steadily against glass. Daniel knew storms didn't last forever. They only passed through, leaving clear skies in their wake. The night stretched long, but he stayed awake, keeping watch over her like a sentinel at his post. For the first time in years, he realized he wasn't thinking of his own pain or failures. His whole being was fixed on protecting this child, her fragile trust, and the fragile hope she might finally be free. The rain had slowed by morning, leaving the street slick and shining under a pale gray sky. In Lily's hospital room, the first streaks of daylight cut across the blinds, striping the floor with soft lines of light. Daniel had dozed off in the chair beside her bed, his head tilted against the wall, but his hand never let go of hers. When she stirred her small fingers, flexing against his palm, his eyes snapped open. "You're still here," Lily whispered, her voice raspy from sleep. Daniel managed a weary smile. "Told you I would be. How are you feeling?" She thought for a moment, staring up at the ceiling. Like the world is too big. Like if I take one step, I'll fall right through it. Daniel leaned forward, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. "That's why I'll be here to hold your hand. You won't fall. Not with me." Before she could answer, Dr. Blake entered carrying a small tray with breakfast. She greeted them softly. "Good morning. I see you both survived the night." She placed the tray on the rolling table, the faint aroma of toast and oatmeal drifting through the room. Lily wrinkled her nose. "It smells hospitally." Daniel chuckled. "That's because it is," he encouraged her. "Try a little, though. You'll need strength," Dr. Blake added. "You don't have to finish it, just enough to give your body something to work with." Lily obediently lifted the spoon, but her eyes never left Daniel's face, as if checking to make sure he was real each time she blinked. Detective Morrison appeared in the doorway, a short while later, her posture crisp, even after another sleepless night. "Daniel, we need to talk." Daniel hesitated, glancing at Lily, but Morrison reassured them both. "Just in the hall. Only a minute." Reluctantly, he stepped outside. Morrison's voice lowered all business. "We've contacted child services, and they'll want to meet with her." "But—" She paused, her eyes narrowing. "I think it would do more harm than good right now. She trusts you. That bond could be the only thing keeping her steady." Daniel felt the weight of those words. "So what happens now?" "We start small," Morrison said. "We build her sense of safety before we dig deeper. No sudden moves, no surprises." She looked him squarely in the eyes. "You need to be ready for this to get harder before it gets easier." Daniel nodded, though unease pulled at his chest. "I'll be ready." Back inside, Lily had pushed the tray away, eating only a few bites. She reached for Daniel immediately, her hand clinging to his like a lifeline. "Where did you go?" "Just outside the door," he reassured her. "I'll always tell you where I'm going." She studied him for a moment, then whispered, "Okay. But you have to promise again." Daniel squeezed her hand gently. "I promise." Later that morning, a soft knock on the door introduced a social worker named Mrs. Whitaker. Her tone kind, her smile rehearsed but warm. She carried a clipboard tucked under her arm and a small stuffed bear in her hands. "Hello, Lily. I brought you a friend." Lily stared at the bear without touching it. Her eyes darted to Daniel. He crouched down beside her. "It's okay. She's here to help, not to take you away." Mrs. Whitaker placed the bear gently on the bed. "He doesn't have a name yet. Maybe you could give him one." Lily hesitated, then picked it up cautiously. "He feels soft," she said, her voice small. She pressed the bear against her chest, then whispered, "I think his name is Jasper." "That's a strong name," Daniel said, smiling at her choice. Mrs. Whitaker nodded approvingly, but kept her distance, sensing the fragile line between comfort and intrusion. After a few minutes, she excused herself, saying she'd return later. When the room was quiet again, Lily looked at Daniel. "Do people always bring gifts when they want you to trust them?" Daniel paused, thinking carefully. "Sometimes. But real trust isn't built with gifts. It's built with time, with keeping promises." She studied his face again, as though measuring the truth of his words. "Then I only trust you right now." The simplicity of it hit him like a punch to the chest. He swallowed hard and nodded. "That's enough. More than enough." Hours passed in the gentle rhythm of hospital life, nurses checking vitals, the soft shuffle of footsteps in the hall, rain clouds breaking outside the window. Daniel stayed beside her through it all, reading to her from a book someone left on the bedside table, his voice even and steady. She leaned into the sound, eyelids drooping though she fought sleep with stubborn determination. "Rest," he urged gently. "I'll be right here." Her small hand tightened around Jasper. "You'll stay." "I'll stay," Daniel said. That night when the hospital quieted, once again Daniel stepped into the hall to stretch his legs. The corridor lights glowed faintly, and for a moment he simply leaned against the wall, rubbing the weariness from his face. Morrison appeared at the end of the hall, her arms crossed her eyes, carrying the weight of unspoken thoughts. "She's stronger than she looks," she said softly. Daniel straightened. "Stronger than me, maybe." "Don't doubt yourself," Morrison replied. "She sees you as her anchor. That matters more than anything I could write in a report." Daniel sighed, glancing toward the room where Lily slept. "I don't know what the road ahead looks like, but I know I can't let her walk it alone." Morrison's voice softened, almost tender. "Then don't." "One step at a time, Daniel. That's all she needs." The weight of her words settled deep within him as he walked back into the room. Lily stirred in her sleep, clutching Jasper tightly, her small chest rising and falling with steady breaths. Daniel sat again in the chair, reaching for her hand. The storm outside had passed, leaving the night quiet and cool. He whispered half to her and half to himself. "One step at a time. I'm not going anywhere." And in the stillness of the hospital night, with only the sound of her breathing to fill the silence, Daniel felt a fragile but undeniable truth settle in his heart. He wasn't just protecting her anymore. He was being remade by her trust, drawn back to life by the small hand that refused to let go of his. The morning sun slipped gently into the hospital room, casting golden streaks across the walls and softening the sterile white around Lily's bed. Daniel stirred awake in the chair, his neck stiff from the awkward angle, but the first thing he noticed was the faint sound of humming. Lily sat upright. Jasper pressed firmly against her chest, humming a tune so delicate it seemed she was afraid it might vanish if she sang it too loudly. He rubbed his eyes. "What song is that?" he asked, his voice still rough from sleep. She startled slightly but didn't stop. "It's one my mom used to sing when she brushed my hair. I think I remember all the notes." Daniel's heart clenched. He leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees. "It's beautiful. Do you want to teach me?" Lily thought about it for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "But you have to promise not to forget it." "I won't forget," Daniel said, meaning every word. He listened intently as she repeated the melody, her voice shaky at first, then steadier as she realized he was following along. By the third round, they were humming together, the small hospital room filled with something that felt alive and whole. Dr. Blake walked in midway, pausing just inside the door. She didn't interrupt, only smiled, the corners of her eyes softening as she watched the fragile scene. When they finished, she finally spoke. "That's the best sound I've heard in this place all week." Lily ducked her head cheeks pink. Daniel smiled. "She's got more talent than me, that's for sure." Blake set down her clipboard. "Talent's not what I heard. I heard trust." She checked Lily's vitals quickly, her movements efficient but gentle. "And trust is the best medicine." Later, Detective Morrison stopped by with an update. She carried a thin folder tucked beneath her arm and looked unusually hesitant. "Daniel, I have a word?" Lily tensed, her small hand tightening around Daniel's. He glanced down, gave her fingers a reassuring squeeze, then turned to Morrison. "If it's about her, she should hear it." Morrison studied him for a moment, then gave a short nod. She set the folder on the windowsill and spoke carefully. "We found out who was responsible for last night. A man named Carson Hale. He has a history with—" She stopped herself, her eyes flicking to Lily. "With things no child should ever see." Lily's grip on Daniel's hand tightened further. "Is he coming here?" she asked, her voice small but steady. "No," Morrison said firmly. "He's in custody. He can't come near you. You're safe here." Daniel bent closer, his eyes level with Lily's. "Did you hear that? He can't touch you. Not ever again." Lily swallowed hard, her gaze fixed on him. "You promise?" He placed his other hand over hers. "I promise." The room went quiet after Morrison left, but the silence wasn't heavy. It was almost like the air itself was giving Lily space to breathe again. She shifted slightly, curling her knees beneath the blanket Jasper tucked under her chin. Finally, she whispered, "If he's gone, then maybe I can sleep without the bad dreams." Daniel brushed her hair gently back. "And if they come anyway, I'll be right here to chase them off." The day stretched on in quiet fragments, nurses checking in Dr. Blake, encouraging Lily to take a few more steps around the room, Daniel reading short stories from the book he had picked up in the waiting area. Lily laughed once unexpectedly at a clumsy character in one of the stories. The sound was so sudden, so startling, that Daniel nearly dropped the book. "There it is," he said softly. "That laugh of yours, it's worth everything." Her cheeks flushed again, but she didn't hide her face this time. In the evening, as the hallway lights dimmed and the hospital slipped into its subdued rhythm, Lily grew quiet. She sat watching the window where the city lights twinkled faintly against the dark sky. Daniel noticed the way her shoulders sagged, the way she seemed to retreat into herself. "What's on your mind?" he asked gently. She hesitated, then whispered, "Do you think my mom knows where I am?" Daniel's throat tightened. "I think," he said slowly, "that your mom loves you so much she'd want to know you're safe. And you are." Lily's eyes filled and she blinked rapidly. "Sometimes I feel like she's just on the other side of the door, like if I run fast enough I can reach her." Daniel leaned closer, his voice low and steady. "She's closer than you think. She's in the song you sang this morning, in every memory you carry, and when you're ready, we'll find a way to honor her together." Tears slipped silently down her cheeks. Daniel didn't say another word. He simply reached out, wiped them away with his thumb, and let her lean against his side. She pressed Jasper between them as though anchoring herself with both the bear and Daniel's steady warmth. That night, when Lily finally drifted to sleep, Daniel sat awake a long time, watching her breathing steady and even. He thought about the road ahead, the challenges, the bureaucracy, the endless questions about what would happen next. But for now, none of that mattered. For now, there was just this room, this quiet, this fragile girl who had let him in. The soft sound of rain began again outside, tapping against the window, as if the world itself were promising to keep the rhythm slow, gentle, safe. Daniel let the sound wash over him, his own eyelids heavy, his hand still resting protectively over Lily's. He knew tomorrow would come with its questions, its battles, its uncertainties. But tonight, as Lily's breathing mingled with the patter of rain, Daniel allowed himself one rare, unguarded thought. Maybe, just maybe, healing had already begun. The next morning dawned quieter than the night before, the storm clouds finally breaking into soft patches of sunlight that streamed through the hospital blinds. Daniel was already awake when Lily stirred. He had spent most of the night drifting in and out of shallow rest, his body aching from the chair, but his mind refusing to let go of the image of her fragile form nestled under the blankets. He rubbed his eyes as she shifted, hugging Jasper tight against her chest. "Morning," she whispered, her voice raspy from sleep. "Morning, sweetheart." Daniel replied, his tone warm. He stood and stretched, then leaned over her bed. "How'd you sleep?" She thought about it for a moment, pressing her lips together before answering. "No bad dreams." He smiled. "That's a win. We'll take it." Lily blinked against the sunlight and looked toward the window. "It feels different today, like the world isn't so heavy." Daniel followed her gaze. The rain-soaked city shimmered in the golden light. The air still damp, but cleaner, softer somehow. He brushed her hair back gently. "That's because you're stronger today than you were yesterday, and tomorrow you'll be even stronger." Before she could answer, the door clicked open. Dr. Blake stepped in, her smile immediate as she saw Lily upright. "Good to see you both survived the night." Lily grinned faintly. "Daniel snores." Daniel lifted his hands in mock defense. "I do not." "You do," Lily said firmly, a spark of playfulness flashing in her eyes. Dr. Blake chuckled. "Well, snoring is a sign of being alive." "I'll take it." She crossed the room to check Lily's vitals, jotting notes on her clipboard. "She's looking better. Color's coming back." "That's because he stayed." Lily blurted suddenly, her small hand clutching at Daniel's sleeve. "He didn't leave me alone." The doctor paused, her expression softening. She glanced at Daniel, then back at Lily. Sometimes the best medicine isn't in a bottle, Lily. Sometimes it's right there beside you. Daniel swallowed hard, caught between pride and the ache of responsibility. She's the brave one, he murmured. Later in the morning, Detective Morrison returned. She carried herself with that same firm presence, but her eyes were softer than usual. She perched at the edge of a chair and glanced at Lily before speaking. We've confirmed Hale won't be seeing daylight for a very long time. The charges against him are airtight. Lily's shoulders eased a fraction. So, he's really gone? Yes, Morrison said. He won't hurt you again. Daniel rubbed her hand, feeling the tension slowly loosen. But Morrison didn't leave right away. She leaned closer to Daniel, lowering her voice. We're working on the custody situation. It may take some time, but the court will want to know who can provide for her who she trusts. Daniel stiffened. What are you saying I'm saying? Morrison replied carefully that she clearly sees you as safe, but the system needs paperwork process hearings. Until then, the hospital remains responsible for her care. Lily's face pinched with worry. Does that mean they'll take me away from Daniel? Daniel bent close, his voice low and steady. No one's taking you anywhere without a fight. Do you hear me? Tears welled in her eyes. But what if they don't let you? Then we'll make them understand, he said, fierce but calm. You're not just a case file, Lily. You're family. Morrison exhaled slowly, clearly moved despite her professional composure. I'll do what I can to make sure the court sees that too. The rest of the day unfolded in small, fragile steps. Dr. Blake encouraged Lily to walk the hallway again this time without clinging so tightly to Daniel's hand. Nurses passed with warm smiles, some stopping to greet her, offering stickers or gentle words. Every gesture seemed to chip away at the invisible wall Lily had built around herself. At one point, she tugged Daniel's sleeve and whispered, "Do you think I could go outside?" Just for a little bit. Daniel glanced at Dr. Blake, who pursed her lips thoughtfully before nodding. Fresh air could do her good, but only for a short while. So they wrapped Lily in a soft cardigan the nurses found, and together they stepped into the small hospital garden. The air was crisp, damp with yesterday's rain, and smelled faintly of earth and new blossoms. Lily tilted her head back, letting the breeze brush against her face. "It smells like freedom," she whispered. Daniel's chest tightened. "Yeah," he said softly. "That's exactly what it is." They sat on a bench beneath a blooming tree, the petals drifting around them like snow. Lily traced shapes in the dirt with her shoe, while Daniel watched quietly, giving her space. After a long silence, she spoke again. "Do you think I could live with you for real, not just here?" Daniel's breath caught. He looked at her, saw the fragile hope shining in her eyes. He knew the weight of what she was asking, the years of commitment, the sacrifices, but none of it scared him. What scared him was the thought of her going anywhere else. "Yes," he said firmly, "if that's what you want, then yes, we'll make it happen." Her lips trembled into a small, relieved smile. She leaned against him. Jasper squished between them and whispered, "Then I'm not scared anymore." They stayed until the sky began to cloud again, the cool breeze hinting at another storm. Back inside, Lily grew drowsy, her head resting against Daniel's arm as he read another story aloud. He didn't realize when her eyes closed, only noticed the peacefulness on her face, the way her grip on Jasper loosened slightly. As the evening shadows stretched long across the room, Daniel sat quietly, his voice a steady rhythm in the dim light, his heart steady for the first time in years. The path ahead was uncertain, but tonight he didn't care. All that mattered was the fragile, steadfast bond growing between them, a bond no storm could wash away. And in that fragile stillness, Daniel knew with complete certainty he wasn't just protecting her. She was saving him too. That evening, the hospital corridors glowed with the low hum of fluorescent lights, footsteps echoing faintly as nurses moved about their shifts. Daniel sat by Lily's bedside with his hands folded, his thumb absently brushing against the worn fabric of Jasper's ear. Lily stirred awake, her eyes blinking slowly as though waking from a long dream. The storm had passed outside, but Daniel could still hear the faint tap of rain against the window. "Did you stay here the whole time?" Lily asked softly, her voice carrying that fragile edge that always made Daniel lean closer. Of course, Daniel answered, his tone steady and warm. Where else would I be? She gave him a look, half disbelief, half wonder. People usually leave. I'm not people, Daniel replied firmly. I'm me. And I'm here for you. Her lips curled into a tiny smile before she nestled back into the pillow Jasper pressed under her chin. That makes me feel safe. Daniel didn't say anything for a moment. He just let her words linger in the air, letting them seep into his chest. He hadn't realized how much he needed to hear them until now. Later that night, Dr. Blake stopped in. She was holding a small file, and her expression was unusually tender. Daniel, she said, glancing briefly at Lily before pulling him aside. We've been contacted by Child Services. They're moving quickly on this case. Daniel's jaw tensed. And what does that mean? It means they'll want to evaluate her living situation soon, Dr. Blake explained. They'll look at your home, your stability, your ability to provide. It's not an attack, it's protocol. I don't care what they call it, Daniel muttered. I'm not letting her slip back into a system that failed her. Dr. Blake placed a hand on his arm. Then show them. Show them the man she sees when she looks at you. Daniel swallowed hard, nodding once. I'll do whatever it takes. The following morning, Lily's strength returned in small bursts. She walked the corridor again, this time daring to let go of Daniel's hand for a few steps before grabbing it back quickly, as though testing the world's reaction. The nurses cheered softly, clapping when she managed the length of the hallway. See, Daniel whispered, leaning down to her. You're unstoppable. Her smile widened, the first true spark of childhood peeking through the layers of fear. Maybe tomorrow I'll try 2 hallways. That's my girl, he said with pride swelling in his chest. When Detective Morrison returned later that day, Lily was sitting up drawing with crayons one of the volunteers had brought. Her small fingers worked carefully across the paper, sketching what looked like a house with a garden. Morrison studied the picture quietly before speaking. Pretty house, she said. Lily nodded without looking up. It's Daniel's house. I put flowers so it doesn't look lonely. Morrison's gaze shifted to Daniel. She's already picturing herself there. I know, Daniel said softly, his hand tightening on the edge of the bed. Morrison exhaled, then crouched so she was level with Lily. You like it there? Lily finally looked up, her eyes clear, her voice firm. It feels like home. For Morrison, there was no arguing with that kind of conviction. She gave Daniel a subtle nod, one that promised she would push things forward in the right direction. That night, Daniel sat by the window while Lily drifted off to sleep. The garden outside shimmered under the street lamp raindrops clinging to the leaves like tiny lanterns. His mind drifted to the challenges ahead, interviews, inspections, the cold judgment of strangers who didn't know Lily's laughter, her quiet strength, or the way she held Jasper as though it contained her entire world. He closed his eyes, whispering to himself, I'll fight for her, every step, every breath, until she knows she'll never be left again. The next day, Lily woke earlier than usual. She asked for pancakes, her small voice full of hope. Daniel laughed, promising he'd make her a whole stack once they were home. The thought of home brought a sparkle to her face that no medicine could replicate. Do you think they'll let me bring Jasper to your house? She asked suddenly. Daniel chuckled. Are you kidding? He gets his own chair at the table. She giggled, clutching the bear tight. Then he'll love it there too. Hours later, when Child Services representatives finally arrived, Daniel felt the weight of the moment settle on his shoulders. A woman in a navy blazer walked in with Morrison by her side, her face professional but not unkind. She introduced herself as Ms. Carter. She observed Lily quietly for a while, asking gentle questions. What do you like to do for fun? Lily glanced at Daniel before answering. I like when Daniel reads to me, and when we eat breakfast together. Ms. Carter tilted her head. And how do you feel when you're with him? Like nothing bad can happen. The room went silent. Daniel's throat tightened, but he kept his composure. Morrison's eyes softened as if even she hadn't expected such a simple, devastating answer. Ms. Carter closed her folder slowly. Thank you, Lily. That's very helpful. As the visit drew to a close, Lily climbed back onto her bed, curling under the blanket. Daniel sat beside her, brushing a strand of hair from her face. She reached out and caught his hand before sleep pulled her under. "Promise me," she whispered. "Promise you what Daniel asked gently, that you'll still be here tomorrow, and the day after that, and all the days." Daniel leaned down, pressing his forehead to hers. "Every day, Lily, I promise." She sighed in relief, her body finally relaxing into the mattress. And as Daniel watched her drift off, he knew that no matter what hurdles came, no system or stranger could ever measure the strength of what they had built together. In these few fragile days, a family forged not by blood, but by choice, love, and unshakable resolve. The morning light filtered through the thin curtains of the hospital room, painting soft golden lines across Lily's sleeping face. Daniel sat in the chair beside her bed, the same chair that had molded to his body after so many nights. His eyes stung from lack of sleep, but his heart was steady. He had made a promise, one he intended to keep. When Lily stirred awake, Jasper was tucked under her chin, his fabric ear damp from the way she held him. Her eyes blinked open, adjusting to the gentle glow. Daniel leaned closer, offering her a smile. "Morning sunshine," he whispered. Lily yawned and stretched her thin arms. "Are we going home today?" she asked, her voice full of fragile hope. Daniel's chest ached. He wanted so badly to say yes. "Not quite yet," he admitted, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. "The doctors still need to be sure you're strong enough, but soon." Her lips pressed into a pout, though she nodded bravely. "Okay, I'll wait." Later that morning, Dr. Blake entered with her usual calm efficiency, her eyes scanning Lily's chart before landing on Daniel. "She's improving," she said. "If this continues, she may be discharged within the week. But Daniel, there's something you need to know. Child Services will be making their decision quickly. They'll visit your home soon." Daniel swallowed. "Then I'll be ready." Dr. Blake studied him for a moment, then placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "Don't underestimate the weight of your consistency. She trusts you. That trust matters more than paperwork sometimes." The words lingered with him as the day went on. When Morrison arrived in the afternoon, she was carrying a bag that seemed too heavy for its size. She set it down and pulled out a small notebook, placing it on Lily's lap. "What's this?" Lily asked, curious eyes lighting up. "It's for you," Morrison replied. "A place to draw or write whatever you want. Think of it as a safe space for your thoughts." Lily opened the cover, carefully running her fingers across the blank page. She looked at Daniel. "Can I draw our house again?" Daniel's throat tightened, but he nodded. "Of course. Draw it as big and beautiful as you like." While she bent over the notebook with a crayon, Morrison spoke quietly to Daniel. "She's attaching quickly, faster than most kids in her situation." Daniel's jaw set. "Because she knows she belongs." Morrison didn't argue. She simply scribbled something in her notes, her expression unreadable. As evening fell, Daniel took Lily for a slow walk in the garden courtyard. The air was crisp, filled with the faint scent of wet earth from yesterday's rain. Lily clutched Jasper with one arm while holding Daniel's hand with the other. She pointed to a patch of flowers near the fence. "Those look like the ones in my drawing," she said. Daniel crouched to her level, letting his gaze follow hers. "They do. When we get home, we can plant some just like them. You can pick the colors." Her eyes sparkled. "Really? Really?" he promised. They sat on the bench for a while, the quiet hum of the city faint beyond the hospital walls. Lily rested her head against his side, her small frame fitting perfectly. Daniel breathed deeply, imprinting the moment into memory. Later that night, as the machines beeped softly and Lily slept, Daniel received a call from Ms. Carter of Child Services. Her tone was professional, but there was a trace of warmth. "Mr. Hayes, we'll be scheduling a home visit tomorrow. I hope that's all right." Daniel's pulse quickened. "Yes, absolutely. Come anytime." "Good," she said. "And Daniel? She speaks highly of you. That carries weight." When the call ended, Daniel sat in the stillness, staring at Lily's sleeping form. He thought of the farmhouse, its chipped paint, the creak of its old floorboards, the way silence filled it like a second occupant. Tomorrow strangers would judge if it was good enough for her. He clenched his fists silently, vowing he'd make them see beyond walls and windows into the love that filled every corner when she was there. The next day came quicker than he was ready for. At dawn, Daniel left briefly to prepare the house. He swept floors, scrubbed counters, laid out fresh sheets on the bed she would use. He even placed Jasper's spare ribbon, a soft pink one, on the pillow, as though it might convince someone that the space was already hers. When Ms. Carter arrived later with another official, Daniel guided them through the rooms with steady hands. He spoke plainly, showing the kitchen where he planned to cook her breakfast, the small library corner where he imagined her reading, and the spare room he had already begun transforming into a child's bedroom. This place may not be new, Daniel admitted, his voice calm but firm. But it's steady, and it's full of space for her to grow, to feel safe, to belong. The officials took notes, their faces neutral, but Daniel stood straighter with every word. That evening, back at the hospital, Lily looked up eagerly when he returned. How did it go? Daniel knelt beside her bed, brushing her cheek gently. It went well. They saw everything, and soon I think they'll see what I see every time I look at you. Her eyes shone, and she whispered, family. Daniel nodded, his voice catching. Family. She wrapped her arms around his neck. Jasper squeezed between them. For a moment, Daniel closed his eyes and let the warmth of her small embrace anchor him. Whatever storms lay ahead, this was the truth he would hold on to, the unshakable bond that had formed in the most unexpected of places, a bond no decision could sever. The morning of the court hearing arrived wrapped in a tension Daniel could feel in his bones. The sun broke low and pale across the farmhouse, painting streaks of gold against the worn wooden boards. He had been awake long before dawn, pacing the kitchen floor, sipping coffee that had long gone cold, rehearsing in silence the words he might have to say. Lily sat at the table, her little legs swinging as she held Jasper in her arms. She was dressed in the simple blue dress Daniel had picked out the night before, the one with the small white daisies embroidered on the hem. Her hair was brushed neatly, tied back with a ribbon she had chosen herself. But her eyes, those wide, uncertain eyes, watched Daniel's every move, searching for the steady reassurance she needed. Do we have to go? She whispered. Daniel knelt down beside her, taking her hand gently. We do, sweetheart. But remember what I told you, this isn't about losing. It's about showing them the truth. What if they don't believe it? They will, he said firmly, though the quiet tremor in his chest betrayed his fear. Because I'll be standing right there with you. When the time came, Daniel lifted her into the truck, buckling her carefully into the seat. The drive into town was hushed, except for the occasional hum of the radio. Lily traced little shapes on the fogged-up window, whispering stories under her breath to Jasper, as if to steady herself. Daniel kept glancing at her in the rear-view mirror, memorizing the curve of her profile, reminding himself what was at stake. The courthouse loomed ahead, its stone columns casting long shadows across the steps. Daniel parked and turned to Lily. Ready? He asked softly. She nodded, though her fingers tightened around Jasper. Inside, the air smelled faintly of old wood and polished marble. The shuffle of papers, the low murmur of voices, the clicking of heels on the floor, all blended into a restless hum. Daniel guided Lily to a bench near the front, his hand never leaving hers. When Morrison appeared, her presence brought an odd sense of steadiness. She greeted Lily warmly, crouching down to her level. You look very brave today, she said. Lily managed a small smile. That's because I am, she whispered back. Court was called into session soon after. Daniel rose, guiding Lily gently forward as Judge Whitaker, a man with silver hair and tired eyes, surveyed the room from behind the bench. The proceedings began formally. Voices reciting legal terms, documents presented the structure of order, trying to contain something as fragile as a child's future. The representative from Child Services spoke first, outlining Lily's history, her instability, the reasons they had hesitated before. The words felt clinical, detached like lines on a paper, rather than pieces of a little girl's life. Daniel sat rigid, jaw clenched, his hand resting protectively on Lily's shoulder. When it was his turn, Daniel stood, every nerve taut, but his voice steady. Your Honor. He began, his tone respectful, but full of quiet conviction. I'm not here to argue statistics. I'm here because this little girl needs more than numbers. She needs family. She needs home. He spoke of their mornings together, the way Lily learned to mix pancake batter, the way she asked questions about the stars before bed. He described the farmhouse not as a perfect place, but as a place that was alive with care, where laughter had begun to echo again in its old walls. She already calls me Dad sometimes without realizing it, Daniel said softly, his voice breaking just enough to reveal the depth of truth. And I can't let her believe for 1 second that belonging is temporary. There was a long pause. The courtroom had stilled the shuffle of papers, fading into silence. Morrison spoke next, her words balanced, but with a note of quiet support. I've observed their bond firsthand. Lily has made progress because she feels safe. That safety is rooted in the consistency Mr. Hayes has provided. It is rare to see such trust form so quickly, and even rarer for it to be this resilient. The judge nodded, taking notes, his expression unreadable. Then he did something unexpected. He looked directly at Lily. Would you like to say something, young lady? The room seemed to hold its breath. Lily glanced at Daniel, who gave her a small nod of encouragement. She clutched Jasper tighter and stepped forward, her little voice trembling but clear. I want to stay with him, she said, because he makes me pancakes, and he reads me stories, and he tells me I'm safe. And when I wake up at night, he's always there. I don't want to go anywhere else. Her words fell into the room like a fragile truth no argument could undo. Daniel felt his throat close, pride and love flooding through him in equal measure. Morrison's eyes softened, and even the judge's stern face seemed to waver for a moment. After a quiet pause, Judge Whitaker leaned back in his chair. Thank you, Lily. That was very brave. The gavel struck lightly, signaling a recess before the decision. Daniel guided Lily back to the bench, his heart pounding. She leaned against him, her head resting on his arm. You did perfect, he murmured, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. As they waited, Daniel's mind raced with every possibility. But beneath the fear was a steady flame of hope, one that refused to go out. Because no matter what verdict was spoken, he knew the truth they had shown together could not be erased. When court resumed, all eyes turned to the judge as he shuffled his notes, his voice solemn. This decision is not one we take lightly, but it is clear to this court that the bond between this child and Mr. Hayes is strong, enduring, and in her best interest to preserve. Therefore, Daniel's hand tightened around Lily's as he braced himself for the words that would determine both their futures. The judge's words seemed to hang in the air, suspended between fear and hope. Daniel sat frozen, his arm curled protectively around Lily, while the quiet scrape of the judge's pen echoed in the courtroom. Therefore, Judge Whitaker continued, his voice steady, but carrying a weight that pressed on everyone in the room. The petition for full guardianship is granted. Mr. Hayes, you are now the legal guardian of Lily. The sound of the gavel striking the block was firm, final, undeniable. For a heartbeat, Daniel could not move. He heard Morrison exhale sharply, almost like a sigh of relief, and he felt Lily's small fingers squeeze his with surprising strength. Then it hit him, the truth of what had just been spoken, and his chest swelled with a rush of emotion that nearly stole his breath. Lily's face tilted up toward him, her eyes wide. Does that mean... Daniel crouched down to meet her at eye level, his own eyes burning. It means you're mine, sweetheart. For good. Her mouth broke into a trembling smile, and then she was hugging him. Jasper caught between them, her little arms wound tight around his neck. I knew it, she whispered. I told Jasper you'd never let them take me. Daniel closed his eyes, pressing his lips to her hair. Never, he promised, his voice thick. You'll never have to wonder again. Around them, the courtroom stirred back to life. Paper shuffled, chairs scraped, people rose and filed out. Morrison approached with a warm, satisfied smile. Congratulations, Daniel. She's right where she belongs. He stood still, holding Lily's hand as though letting go would risk undoing everything. Thank you for believing in us. Morrison's expression softened. You didn't need me to believe. You proved it yourselves. She touched Lily's shoulder lightly. You did very well today, young lady. Lily beamed, her cheeks pink with pride. It wasn't scary when he was here, she said, nodding toward Daniel. Morrison gave a knowing smile before gathering her files and stepping away. Daniel gathered their things slowly, wanting to savor the moment to make sure it was real. As they left the courthouse, the heavy doors swung open to a burst of late afternoon sunlight spilling gold across the steps. The world outside seemed brighter, freer, as though it too had been waiting for this verdict. Daniel lifted Lily onto his hip, carrying her down the steps. She rested her head on his shoulder, exhausted but safe, her small hand tucked securely against his chest. What do we do now? She murmured sleepily. Daniel smiled. Now we go home. The ride back to the farmhouse felt different this time. The road stretched out before them, not as a line of uncertainty, but as a path they could finally claim together. Lily dozed off in the back seat. Jasper held snug against her, the steady rise and fall of her breath, filling the cab with peace. Daniel drove with one hand on the wheel, the other drumming softly against his thigh, releasing the nervous energy that still buzzed inside him. Every mile closer to home felt like a new promise. Every turn in the road a step further into the life they were finally allowed to have. When they pulled into the driveway, the farmhouse looked the same as always, weathered boards, sagging porch rail, the windmill creaking lazily in the breeze. But to Daniel, it looked transformed. It wasn't just a house anymore. It was theirs. He carried Lily inside her arms, still wrapped around his neck, even as she stirred awake. "Are we home?" she mumbled. "Yeah," he whispered, kissing her temple. "We're home." The evening unfolded with a sense of celebration, though there were no balloons or cake, just the simple comfort of being together. Daniel cooked dinner pasta with butter and cheese, Lily's favorite, and she insisted on setting the table herself, carefully laying out forks and napkins while humming under her breath. At the table, Lily kept sneaking glances at him, as if to make sure he hadn't disappeared. "So, does this mean I get to stay in my room forever?" she asked, twirling pasta around her fork. Daniel chuckled. "It means that's your room for as long as you want it. No one can say otherwise." Her smile widened. "Then I want it forever." Later, after dishes were washed and the house quieted, they settled into their usual bedtime routine. Daniel read her favorite story aloud, his voice steady and warm, while she leaned against him beneath the soft glow of the lamp. Halfway through the book, she slipped her hand into his, her eyelids drooping. "Dad," she whispered suddenly, the words slipping out so naturally it startled him. Daniel's throat tightened. "Yeah, sweetheart. Can we plant a garden in spring with daisies and maybe strawberries?" He smiled through the sting in his eyes. "Of course. We'll plant as many as you like." She nodded, sleepily satisfied, and drifted off with Jasper nestled beside her. Daniel sat for a long time watching her breathe, memorizing the peace on her face. For months he had fought to keep her here, to give her this sense of safety. And now, with the papers signed and the verdict declared, she truly belonged. When he finally rose and pulled the blanket over her, he lingered in the doorway. The farmhouse creaked softly, the night air humming with crickets outside. And for the first time in years, Daniel felt something steady, unshakable. He felt whole. He stepped onto the porch, the cool night air brushing against his skin. Above, the stars stretched wide and brilliant, the same ones Lily always asked about. He leaned against the railing, letting the weight of the day sink in. There would still be challenges, he knew that. Parenting wasn't about a single court ruling. It was about every choice from here on out. But tonight, they had won something that could never be taken back. Inside, he heard Lily stir and murmur softly in her sleep. He smiled, turning back to the door. Because no matter what tomorrow brought, she would wake up in the same bed, in the same home, knowing she was loved. And that was enough to steady him for whatever lay ahead. The morning light spilled gently through the farmhouse curtains, painting golden stripes across the worn wooden floor. Daniel woke early, as he often did, but this time he lay still for a while, listening. The soft rhythm of Lily's breathing carried faintly down the hall, accompanied by Jasper's occasional muffled yawn. It was the sound of belonging, of permanence, and it filled him with a quiet joy he had rarely allowed himself before. When he rose and padded into the kitchen, the house greeted him with its usual creaks and sighs. The coffee pot hissed, filling the air with a warm, earthy scent. Daniel leaned on the counter and let his thoughts wander back to the courthouse, to the gavel's echo, to Lily's trembling smile when she realized she was finally his. The memory made his chest swell until it almost hurt. For years he had lived with the fear of loss gnawing at him. Now that fear had been replaced by something steadier, a responsibility, yes, but also a profound peace. The clatter of small footsteps pulled him from his thoughts. Lily appeared in the doorway, hair tousled from sleep, clutching Jasper against her chest. She blinked at him with sleepy eyes. "Morning, Dad," she mumbled, as though testing the word again, as though still savoring the right to say it. Daniel crouched down and opened his arms. She shuffled into his embrace, the dog sandwiched between them. "Morning, sweetheart," he whispered. "Sleep well?" She nodded against his shoulder. "I dreamed we planted that garden." "The daisies were taller than me," he chuckled, smoothing her hair. "Sounds like a good dream. Maybe it's a sign we should start planning." Her eyes brightened at that, already awake now with excitement. "Can we draw it out on paper today? Where everything will go?" "Of course," Daniel said, setting her gently on a chair. "But first pancakes. We need fuel for garden planning." The morning unfolded in warmth and laughter. Daniel flipped pancakes while Lily stirred the syrup with exaggerated seriousness, insisting Jasper needed a tiny plate too. They ate at the table with the window open, letting in the breeze that carried the scent of wildflowers from the fields beyond. Later, with the dishes cleared, Lily spread a sheet of paper across the table. She held a pencil, tightly tongue poking out in concentration as she drew uneven circles for flower beds. "Here's where the daisies go," she explained, tapping the page. "And strawberries here, and maybe a swing by the big oak tree." Daniel watched her with a soft smile. The innocence of her dreaming was contagious, lifting the heaviness of his own worries. He took the pencil when she offered it and added a rectangle for raised beds. "These will be for vegetables. Carrots. Beans. Maybe tomatoes." "What do you think?" Lily leaned close, her small hand resting on his arm. "I think it looks like forever." The words struck him deeply. He wrapped an arm around her shoulders, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "Yeah," he murmured. "It does." As the day passed, they carried their plans outside. Daniel showed Lily how to mark the ground with sticks and twine, turning empty patches of earth into future gardens. Lily darted around with Jasper at her heels, her laughter ringing across the yard. Watching her, Daniel felt something settle inside him, a sense of anchoring he had longed for without even realizing how much. By evening, the sky flushed with streaks of pink and orange. They sat together on the porch, tired but happy. Lily leaned against him, swinging her legs. "You know what the best part is?" she asked suddenly. "What's that? That we don't have to worry anymore. We can just be us." Daniel looked out at the horizon, the fields rolling gently into the distance. "You're right," he said quietly. "We can just be us." The crickets began their nightly chorus, and the stars blinked awake overhead. Lily's head grew heavy on his shoulder, her words slowing with sleep. "Dad," she whispered. "Yeah, sweetheart. Do you think Mom can see us from heaven?" Daniel's chest tightened. He hesitated, then brushed a hand over her hair. "I think she can, and I think she's proud of you, proud of us." A small, content sigh escaped her. "Good," she murmured, drifting off in his arms. Daniel stayed on the porch, holding her close until the night air grew cool and the fireflies danced in the tall grass. When he finally carried her inside, tucking her into bed, he lingered at her doorway, watching her sleep. She looked so peaceful, so safe. For the first time, Daniel felt the weight of the future not as a threat, but as a gift. It stretched before them like the fields beyond their home, open, fertile, full of promise. There would be challenges, yes, but they would face them together. As he turned off the lamp and the house settled into silence, Daniel allowed himself a rare, unguarded smile. The fight was behind them, the fear was gone. And in its place, something stronger had taken root: love, family, and the certainty that no matter what lay ahead, they would face it side by side.